Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the key tactical themes in Italy's narrow win over Spain. So when we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have both sides starting the game in a 4-3-3. So first, we're going to look at how Italy looked to disrupt Spain from dominating the game, how Spain were able to overcome that, and then we'll focus on how Italy were also able to create high quality chances. The main talking point ahead of kickoff did consist of Spain's front three, and what we ended up seeing was that Ferran Torres and Oyarzabal were playing out in the wider areas, and they were hugging the touchline to stretch the pitch, and then you had Dani Olmo playing up front as a false nine. So what Spain were trying to do here was overload that central area, and we often saw Olmo dropping off into deeper positions in search of possession. This was key because Italy did look to press from the front, and what we ended up seeing from Italy was that they had Immobile and Insigne stepping towards the center backs. It left Azpilicueta free in the right back zone, and that was probably due to the fact that Italy weren't wary of his attacking threat. So if the ball was shifted out to Azpilicueta, you would need Emerson to push higher up the pitch and then Chiellini to come across to deal with Oyarzabal. What we ended up seeing from Italy was that they were focused on ensuring that Spain couldn't dominate the center of the pitch. So you often had Immobile blocking off the passing lane into Busquets as he was looking to step into the path of Laporte, but that often left the midfield zone 3v3. Barella would push forward to deal with Busquets, and if he didn't, then you would see Jorginho stepping into that path. But you often saw Barella pushing forward to close down the deep-lying midfielder, while Jorginho dealt with Pedri pushing forward, and Verratti was pushing forward to deal with Koke. Here you could see Italy's press on full display with Insigne and Immobile stepping towards the center backs, Chiesa prepared to push forward to Jordi Alba, and you have Verratti and Barella applying pressure towards Koke and Busquets. And then later on you could see Italy's high press in full effect with Immobile closing down Laporte, Chiesa stepping into the path of Jordi Alba, and you could see Italy's entire midfield trio closing down Busquets, Pedri, and Koke. The problem here was that Olmo was dropping off into that midfield zone, and if Chiellini or Bonucci didn't step with him, then that does create overload in that area. There were several times where you ended up seeing Pedri occupying that space with Olmo, and Jorginho didn't know who to step towards. Ferran Torres was narrow pulling out Di Lorenzo, and Jordi Alba was looking to peg back Chiesa. This is an example of Spain's 4v3 in that midfield zone. You have Insigne pulled out by Azpilicueta, and then look in that area. You have Pedri occupying Jorginho, Verratti focused on Koke, and Barella shifting across to Dani Olmo as he has to leave Busquets because Olmo dropped off into that midfield zone. Here you could see Busquets pulling out Immobile and Barella when he receives the ball from Garcia, and you have Verratti ahead of Koke, but look in that midfield zone. You have Pedri and Olmo dropping to either side of Jorginho. Busquets ends up bypassing both Italian players, and that allows Pedri to receive the ball between Chiesa and Jorginho, and he could slide the ball out to Ferran Torres or look to run at the Italian center backs. Pedri ends up carrying it towards Bonucci, and because Chiellini is looking to step out into the path of Olmo, that creates a gap for Pedri to split to find Oyarzabal running across Emerson. Pedri ends up playing the ball between that gap, and from this position, Oyarzabal should be carrying that ball towards goal to put Spain ahead, but he fails to control it and he allows Emerson to clear the lines. Later on, you could see Azpilicueta pulling out Insigne, and you also have Barella stepping higher up the pitch to close down Busquets. When Azpilicueta plays the ball across Insigne, it falls into the path of Dani Olmo, dropping into the midfield zone towards the left of Jorginho, and you see Pedri towards the right as Verratti is dealing with Koke. Olmo ends up playing the ball across Jorginho into the path of Pedri, and because Chiesa doesn't shift across, it allows Pedri to carry the ball freely into Italy's half, and that's how Spain's able to bypass the press. Here you could see Barella applying tight pressure on Busquets higher up the pitch, and you could see Verratti looking to shift away from Koke to close down Azpilicueta as Emerson didn't get tight quickly. By the time Emerson gets to Azpilicueta and Verratti looks to shift back to Koke, Koke is able to play a forward pass in towards the halfway circle, and it falls into the path of Dani Olmo dropping towards the left of Jorginho, and that's where you could see Pedri free in that midfield zone because Jorginho has to shift across. That ultimately results in Olmo playing the ball into the path of Pedri, and that leads to Spain pushing forward. Here you see Insigne applying late pressure towards Garcia with Barella near Busquets, Verratti blocking off the passing lane into Koke, and you could see Dani Olmo dropping off into the halfway circle to drag out Jorginho, and Chiesa shifting across late, which leaves Pedri free. That ultimately results in Olmo flicking the ball over Jorginho into the path of Pedri, and that allows Spain to push forward. Spain enjoyed relative success with those overloads in that midfield zone, and the only real way that they could combat that threat is if they had Chiesa stepping into that central area to deal with Pedri, and then when you had Barella dealing with Busquets, Koke would be in a battle with Verratti, and Jorginho could deal with the threat of Olmo if they didn't want Bonucci or Chiellini to step into that zone. That obviously leaves Jordi Alba free, but if the ball is shifted out to the Spanish left back, then you can rely on Chiesa to shift across to provide cover. To no surprise, we witnessed a similar press from Spain. It was almost stepping out to the path of Bonucci, and Oyarzabal was stepping into the path of Chiellini but blocking off the passing lane into Emerson. If the ball was played into the path of Emerson, you would see Azpilicueta stepping forward to deal with the left back, and when Insigne dropped deeper, Garcia would stick tight on him. Spain trusted Laporte dealing with Immobile in that zone, and what often happened there was that in that midfield area, you had Koke stepping to Verratti, Pedri applying pressure on Jorginho to ensure that those two deep-lying midfielders couldn't get on the ball, and Busquets would push high on Barella. Here you can see an example of Oyarzabal and Dani Olmo stepping into the path of the Italian center-backs, and you have Koke and Pedri applying pressure to Verratti and Jorginho. And when the ball is shifted out into the path of Di Lorenzo, you have Ferran Torres applying pressure and Busquets stepping into the Italian third to close down Barella. There were times where you did see Busquets holding his position rather than stepping to apply pressure to Barella, and that was due to the fear of his vertical runs into the final third. More specifically, when Garcia was stepping into the path of Insigne, then that forced Laporte to shift across to deal with Immobile, and Busquets would drop into that center back position to deal with the movement of Barella. For the most part, Spain's pressing was successful in that opening half, and the only real time that we witnessed Italy posing issues was down their left-hand side when you had Azpilicueta pushing out to close down Emerson, and then you were able to see a two-man game between Insigne and Emerson to bypass Garcia and Azpilicueta. In this example, you could see Emerson bypassing Azpilicueta and Verratti pulling out Garcia. Verratti does well to play the ball back into the path of Emerson, and that's where you see the Italian left back making a run beyond Azpilicueta and Garcia, and it forces Koke to shift across to concede a foul. Shortly after that, you could see Chiellini playing the ball across Oyarzabal into the path of Emerson ahead of Azpilicueta, and Insigne drifting laterally across Garcia. When Emerson plays the ball into the path of Insigne, he instantly pokes it across Garcia and across Azpilicueta into the path of Emerson to break forward in towards the left channel, and that ends up pulling out Unai Simon, and from this position, Italy should be scoring, but it's Busquets who makes a vital interception. Meanwhile, when we briefly look at the second half, Italy did drop off deeper into more of a 4-5-1, and that's where we ended up seeing Spain being able to push the fullbacks forward, as they had Alba pushing forward from the left with Ferran Torres now shifting into more of a narrow position ahead of Bonucci, and what you ended up seeing from the right hand side was that Oyarzabal was shifting narrow as well, and Azpilicueta was looking to peg back Insigne. In those midfield zones, Pedri and Koke were occupying the gaps between the wide players and the central midfielders, and that's where you would see them looking to make runs in behind the fullbacks when Alba or Azpilicueta did get on the ball. What you ended up seeing from Italy was that Immobile was blocking off the passing lane into Busquets, and Jorginho was looking to step forward to close him down. And what you also ended up seeing was that Koke was dropping off into the half spaces later on in that half to get on the ball to help Azpilicueta push higher up the pitch. This time you could see Koke receiving the ball in the inside right position to pull out Verratti, focus on Dani Olmo's positioning ahead of Jorginho, and you could see Oyarzabal looking to make a run off Chiellini, who is ball watching. When Koke clips that ball over the top, Oyarzabal receives it in between the Spain center backs, and now you can see Dani Olmo looking to make a forward run beyond Jorginho to receive the layoff. Oyarzabal is able to hold off Chiellini and blade the ball off into the path of Dani Olmo running beyond Jorginho in this position, but he drags his first time effort wide of the net. So along with Pedri dropping off deeper to pick up the ball ahead of Chiesa and Barella, Italy's decision to drop off a bit deeper and compress space between the lines means that we saw limited impact from Olmo prior to the goals, and it was Italy's two-man game between Immobile and Insigne, along with Chiesa's forward movement that got them into positions to kill off the game. In the build-up to Italy's opener, it's Verratti sliding the ball out to Insigne in the left channel, and while he pulls out Koke, focus on Immobile's movement in between the center backs, and also look at Chiesa in the halfway circle. Insigne does a very good job of bypassing Koke and Garcia, and from this position, Laporte should be clearing the lines as he gets to the ball first. What ends up happening is that he clears the ball towards the edge of the box, and it allows Chiesa to run onto it, and even from this position, you have 3v1 in that area, so you need Garcia to step forward to apply pressure to the Italian wide player. But because Garcia doesn't step, he allows Chiesa to get the ball onto his right foot with space, and that's how he's able to bend the ball into the net. This immediately forced Luis Enrique to shift his system to a 4-2-3-1, and that's where you predominantly saw Koke in the half space looking to pick up the ball, Pedri in an inside left position, and Morata playing just ahead of Olmo. Now with Morata up front, you had a player that could occupy the center backs and make runs into the channels or in the gaps between the center backs and the fullbacks, and then we ended up seeing Rodri come on for Koke, and Gerard Moreno move to the right side of the pitch, and he was able to receive the ball in between the lines and play it into the gaps between Chiellini and Emerson for Morata to break into. With Spain pushing bodies higher up the pitch, Mancini looked to bring on Insigne to prevent him from defensive duties, and then you had Chiesa and Berardi who were able to break into the channels in transition. To add to that, he ended up bringing on Toloi for Emerson to try and prevent Spain from dominating that right side of the pitch, and then he turned to Pessina for additional energy in that midfield zone. But while Italy improved in the second half, coincidentally it was the midfield overload with Morata dropping off deeper that helped Spain get back into the game. The build up to Spain's equalizer, you have Laporte carrying the ball towards the halfway circle with Pessina stepping in towards him, and you have Insigne looking to drop off towards Busquets, Barella occupied by Rodri, and you could see Pedri looking to pull out Jorginho. Laporte ends up sliding the ball across Pessina into the path of Morata dropping off in towards the midfield zone. And when Morata receives the ball, he's able to turn forward, and that's where you see Jorginho looking to try and track back to close him down. Morata slides the ball across Chiellini into the path of Olmo, and now you have Chiellini pulled out of position with Morata able to make a forward run off his shoulder, and Bonucci again in a position where he can't intercept that pass. Olmo slides the ball across Bonucci into the path of Morata, which places him in this position, and he finishes the 1v1 against Donnarumma. So as you can see, Spain's overloads played a key role in the tactical battle, but their poor finishing combined with Italy's two-man game in transition kept Roberto Mancini's men in the game, thus presenting them the opportunity to win in a shootout.